You know, if you ever get the chance to stand at the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza, your brain just kind of shorts out. I mean, it is so massive, so ancient, it just feels impossible. It's a structure that's inspired some truly wild explanations over the years. But the real story? Well, that's even more incredible. Okay, let's dive into how they actually did it.
So just to really wrap your head around the scale we're talking about, the Great Pyramid is made of an estimated 2.3 million stone blocks. Most of them weigh around 2.5 tons. That's about the same as a big SUV. But then you get to some of the granite blocks, and those weigh as much as 80 tons. So the question is, how on earth did they do it?
For a lot of people, the answer has been to, look to the stars. The sheer size and precision just make them think, no way, this couldn't have been human. But we're going to park the alien theory right here. It's a fun idea, for sure, but it sells ancient humanity so incredibly short.
Then there's the other popular image, right? The one we've all seen in movies, of countless slaves being whipped as they haul these massive stones under the hot sun. We need to just completely erase that picture from our minds. The actual archaeological evidence tells a vastly different and honestly way more interesting story. Because the truth is, the Great Pyramid is a monument to human ingenuity, to incredible organization, and just sheer willpower. It wasn't built by aliens or a miserable, enslaved workforce. No, it was built by skilled professionals, master engineers, and basically an entire nation working together. To really get how they pulled off what might be the greatest construction project in history, we're going to break it down. We're going to turn the impossible into 5 very possible challenges they had to solve. First up, the people who actually did the work.
Okay, so if they weren't aliens and they weren't slaves, who in the world were these builders? Well, the answer comes from a game-changing discovery made right next to the pyramids themselves, a huge, highly organized city built just for the workers. The pyramids were built by a massive rotating workforce using a system called corvée labor. See, every year, the Nile River would flood its banks, which made farming impossible for a few months. So the state drafted these farmers. It was seen as a kind of national service, a way to pay your taxes with good old-fashioned sweat, and even an act of religious devotion to the pharaoh. And get this, they were treated incredibly well. Excavations of the workers' village found evidence of huge bakeries and breweries. Bone analysis shows they ate prime cuts of beef, sheep, and goat. Total luxury for a common person back then. They drank a thick, nutritious beer that was packed with calories. And skeletons show they had access to amazing medical care, with perfectly set bones and even evidence of successful brain surgery.
This is what I love, what really makes these people real. Deep inside the pyramids, these crews left graffiti, basically tagging their work. We found team names like the Friends of Khufu Gang, and my absolute favorite, the Drunkards of Menkaure. Now, that is not the mark of a slave, that is the boast of a proud competitive work crew having a bit of fun.
Okay, so you've got your workforce. Awesome. Now you need the stone. Millions and millions of tons of it. So how do you carve all that out of the earth when you don't have iron or steel tools? Let's take a look. They used 2 main types of stone. Most of the pyramid is limestone, which was super convenient. They just quarried it right there on the Giza Plateau. For that, they could use copper chisels. But for those huge, heavy-duty blocks inside the king's chamber, they needed granite. And granite is incredibly hard, and it had to be brought from Aswan, over 500 miles away. So here's the thing. You can't cut granite with a soft copper chisel. It just won't work. So instead, they use this incredibly clever physics-based method. Workers would pound trenches into the rock using heavy balls of dolerite, which is a much harder stone. Then they hammered dry wooden wedges into little slots along that trench, and all they had to do was pour water on them. The wood would swell and expand with this immense force, splitting the granite clean off the bedrock. So simple, so brilliant.
Getting an 80-ton block of granite out of the ground is one heck of a challenge, but moving it 500 miles? That's a whole other level. And for the longest time, how they did this was just a massive mystery. And then, in 2013, archaeologists found the smoking gun. Seriously, in a cave by the Red Sea, they discovered these ancient papyrus scrolls. It turned out to be the logbook of a man named Mirror, an overseer whose job was transporting stone for the Great Pyramid. It's this incredible day-by-day account of exactly how they did it.
Murner's diary confirmed what a lot of people already suspected: the Egyptians were absolute masters of water. The Nile was their superhighway. They dug this huge network of man-made canals that basically brought the Nile's floodwaters right to the base of the Giza Plateau. This meant giant barges could float in and deliver those massive stones directly to the construction site's doorstep.
But what about moving the stones on land, like from the quarry to the port? Well, an ancient tomb painting gave us the clue. It shows a man pouring liquid in front of a sledge carrying a statue. Physicists tested this, and it works like a charm. Trying to pull a heavy sledge on dry sand is almost impossible. The sand just piles up in front. But if you add just the right amount of water, it makes the sand firm and cuts the pulling friction literally in half. So simple and so revolutionary.
All right, we've quarried the stones, we've floated them to the site, and we've dragged them to the base. Now for the biggest, most debated question of all. How in the world did they get those blocks 481 feet up into the air?
You've probably heard the common theories, a big, long, straight ramp, or maybe a spiral ramp that wraps around the outside. The problem is, both of these have fatal flaws. A straight ramp that was long enough and high enough would have been a bigger construction project than the pyramid itself. And a spiral ramp would cover up the corners, which would make it impossible for the surveyors to keep the pyramid's lines perfectly straight.
So a French architect named Jean-Pierre Houdin came up with this really radical idea. He asked, what if the main ramp wasn't on the outside at all? What if it was on the inside?
Houdin's theory is just so elegant. Here's how it works. You use a short external ramp to build the huge base of the pyramid, which, by the way, contains most of the stone. Then, you actually dismantle that ramp and reuse its blocks to build an internal tunnel that spirals its way up just inside the pyramid's outer edge. And the craziest part? Microgravitometry scans done back in the 80s actually show this strange, low-density spiral shape right where Houdin predicted this ramp would be. So they've built this literal mountain of stone. But the Great Pyramid wasn't just big, it was a precision instrument. So the final challenge was giving it a near-perfect finish. The level of precision here is just staggering. The entire 13-acre base is leveled to within a single inch. They probably did this by cutting trenches, filling them with water, and then marking the waterline. And the alignment? It's aligned to true north almost perfectly, off by just a tiny fraction of a degree. They figured this out by tracking stars that never set below the horizon, a method that is unbelievably accurate even by today's standards. Now, you have to picture this. The pyramid we see, that's just the core. Originally, it was completely encased in highly polished white Tura limestone, making it perfectly smooth. It would have shone, literally shone like a mirror in the desert sun. And the capstone at the very top was likely covered in electrum, a mix of gold and silver, gleaming like a captured star. You know, it's easy to look at the pyramids and jump to conclusions about magic or aliens. But when we do that, we rob our own ancestors of their greatest achievement. The real story, the one made of mud, sweat, rope, and incredible human cooperation, that's far more powerful. So the next time you see the Great Pyramid, don't wonder if aliens built it. Instead, just marvel at what we as human beings are capable of when we decide to work together.
Please like and subscribe.